Gonna put in some flowers to make it look a little bit prettier since I don't have any bookshelves currently. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the 30 plus books I got for my birthday this year. As I'm filming this, it was my birthday just shy of a week ago. As this goes up, it'll be a couple weeks, but yeah, my birthday is kind of mid-January and I got a lot of books for my birthday, clearly. What I will say, and I just want to clarify this, is that I didn't get these books directly for my birthday. I did get a couple of them directly, but for my birthday, my mom usually gives me a bit of money because it's easier when you live kind of across the world to transfer money than it is to ship things, especially the way things are at the moment. And then I also got a little bit of money from my husband for my birthday, as well as some other things. So I used that money to basically buy two different categories of things. So I spent some of it on books and I spent some of it on art supplies and stuff that I'll be trying out with you in the future. But I thought it would be really fun to do a book haul because I haven't done that in a while. So I've got 30 physical books and I've got, I think, about 5 or 6 books that will be physical but are pre-orders or for some other reason just aren't here yet. So there's like obviously a delay in shipping or something like that. So I will be sharing those with you as well, but I thought I would share the physical books first. I have separated them into fiction and non-fiction, and I think you're going to see quite a few, especially in the non-fiction, themes throughout my orders, my book orders. So let's just jump right on in. I thought first I would share with you the book that I just started last night. Hopefully I'll be done by the time this video goes up. But I just started How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang, or Zhang, I think is how you pronounce it. This was longlisted for the Booker Prize last year, and the reason I picked this up is because of the subject matter. This is about 2 children whose parents have died and they now have to make their way in the world. The setting is the American West in the 1800s, so their father moved their family out west because of the whole manifest destiny, land of gold promise. It was a real historical thing at this time where there was advertised all over the country that there was gold out in the hills and you could get rich and live a better life. So they are out in the West. As we start the book, their father dies, so that is not a spoiler by any means, and it's their story of how they survive. I'm only about, I think, 30 pages in so far. Yeah, 30 pages exactly in so far, and I can already tell that this is going to be a very pertinent, poignant story about relationships, about family, about familial expectations. There's also an aspect of this of the other and immigration, since the 2 children and their family are actually Asian immigrants. So there is already in the first 30 pages quite a lot of othering and name calling and racism that they now have to deal with on their own. It's been a hard 30 pages to read. I don't think by any means that this is going to be an easy book, but the American West and the American dream and manifest destiny is a subject I've always been really interested in. I actually wrote my dissertation on manifest destiny and the American dream through Joan Didion's writing. And so this is always a subject that I gravitate towards. I saw this on Instagram, either on, I think it was Fiction Matters. I think that's the account, but it could have been the Unread Shelf. Which, just as a side note, are 2 Instagram accounts I would highly recommend. They are currently my go-to Instagram accounts for recommendations. The next 2 books I received actually from my friend Petra, who also has a channel here on YouTube that I will link down below. She's a great booktuber and I love her weekly vlogs, and she was very very kind as to send me 2 books for my birthday, which was just way too much. So she sent me Tidelands by Felipe Gregory. Felipe Gregory is an author that I just love. She's kind of a guilty pleasure, although I don't really like that term because I don't ever feel guilty for liking her books. I just think they're riveting. I obviously don't go to them for historical accuracy. I know that can be a problem with some people, but be it that she writes fiction, it's not something I necessarily look for anyway. This book takes place in the 17th century and follows a character named Eleanor who lives in a small town in Sussex. And at the time that this takes place, there is a war going on. And there's a lot of hostility between what side you're on and who you align with, and people are keeping lots of secrets. Eleanor herself is suspected of having some kind of dark power, I believe. The villagers suspect her of possessing dark secrets and they watch her every move. And then she meets a character named James who needs a place of refuge for the evening, and she risks everything to show him the hidden ways across the treacherous marsh. So this is pretty typical Felipe Gregory. There's clearly an interpersonal relationship going on, a lot of secrets. It's historical fiction, which is of course a favorite of mine. And I'm really looking forward to this one. I know that Tidelands follow-up book, the second book, I don't know, sequel is the word I'm looking for, just came out. So I'm really looking forward to getting to this one so that I can also read the sequel. I'm not sure exactly how many books are going to be in the series, but like I said, I enjoy Felipe Gregory. She's a really easy read for me, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that one. And then the second book that Petra sent me is a book I've actually read before and I really liked, and for whatever reason didn't continue on with it. So I had put it on my wish list so that I could reread it and finish out the trilogy. And that is Katherine Arden's The Bear and the Nightingale. This takes place in Russia. This is another historical fiction, but it's got fantasy elements, and it has to do a lot with Russian myth and legends. There's a lot of folklore within this story, a lot of family secrets once again, and it's a truly magical story to read. And at the time that I read it, it had just come out, I think, and I wasn't sure if there were going to be sequels or if I felt the need to read the sequels. Either way, I don't have it anymore. And Petra loves this book, so she was very kind to send me a new copy so I could reread it and continue on with the series, which I'm looking forward to. This is also great atmosphere for a winter read, so if you're looking for something, although I'm sure most of you have read it, if you're looking for something with great kind of wintry, dark, that kind of like empty landscape atmosphere, this is definitely a good book for that. So the last book that I got as an actual kind of physical gift was from my mother-in-law, and that is The Dressmaker's Gift by Fiona Valpi, I think is how you pronounce her name. This is a World War II set novel about a seamstress, 3 seamstresses, that try and live their normal lives throughout the Nazi occupation in Paris, but of course get wrapped up in the war and in the resistance, and it's about, I assume it's about their 3 stories, and I would think that maybe they cross paths eventually. I think this also has to do with a little bit of a time swap, so I believe we start with the 3 seamstresses in 1940, and then it says that we go to 2 generations later, and we follow one of the girls' granddaughter. So I am really looking forward to this as well. I love a World War II story, I won't lie, and historical fiction is just something I think I'll always pick up, something I'm always going to be interested in. I've been reading it since I was a kid. So yeah, it's good, and it was a great gift for me for my birthday. So the rest of the books I bought myself with money that was given to me for my birthday, so they're still gifts. The first one I'm going to show you, I don't actually know tons about, but it's an author that I kind of just automatically buy now, and that is The Death of Francis Bacon by Max Porter. This is his newest book. It's very slim. I would be surprised if it broaches 100 pages. It's about 70 pages long and the font's quite big. I don't know anything about this, really. All it says on the back is Madrid, unfinished, man dying, and I do believe it's Max Porter's take on the death of Francis Bacon, but in Max Porter style, so there's probably some elements that are a little bit fantastical, a little bit surreal, which I think would really lend itself to the subject matter because Francis Bacon obviously was an artist. I'm looking forward to reading this one, but I will be doing a little bit of context reading on Francis Bacon before I go into it, just because, to be totally honest, I don't know that much about Francis Bacon, and I think it would help with my reading experience if I got a little bit more familiar. The next book I got is a modern classic, and that is Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. This is about Frank and April Wheeler, who live a seemingly normal suburban life, but really feel like they want to elevate themselves in society and lead a life that's a little bit more extraordinary. So they make changes to their lifestyle, and from what I gather from the blurb, it starts to kind of deteriorate their marriage and their relationship, and maybe even their life, their morals. I'm not sure, I clearly haven't read it yet. But this is a book I've been meaning to read for a long time, and I didn't have a copy, and Lewis didn't have a copy, so I thought I would pick it up. This is a book that a lot of people that I admire and that I really like, whether they're bookish or not, really love, and I've heard really great things about it. So I am hoping to dip into this one quite soon. It's not too long, and I think it's going to be a really interesting study on marriage and relationships and class system and how those kind of go together. I also picked up Lust for Life, the story of Vincent van Gogh by Irving Stone. I saw this one on Instagram, and to be totally honest, immediately wanted it because of the cover. I just found it really striking. I love a classic portrait on a cover. I'm not usually much, I should say, for that kind of bright highlighter yellow or any color really for text, but I just thought this was really well done, really, really striking. This is quite a simple plot, actually. It is Vincent van Gogh's life fictionalized by Irving Stone. I think I know kind of the basis of Van Gogh's life. I know bits and pieces. I've watched very short documentaries that have mostly been around his paintings in the context of that, but other than that, I really have very little knowledge of what his life was like other than the base facts. Now obviously this is fiction, so it's to be taken with a grain of salt, but I thought this would be a really interesting introduction into reading more about Van Gogh's life and the influences that he had environmentally for his work. I picked up an absolute doorstopper of a book as well, and that is The Eighth Life by Nino Heretishvili. This is, from what I know, which is very little, a family saga book that follows generations of people in Russia. That's all I know. That's all I really want to know. The reviews from this, from people that I trust and have similar tastes to me, have been excellent. What I will say is that this size paperback, the font is minuscule. I don't think you'll be able to see exactly, but yeah, I'm gonna definitely need my glasses for this one. I love a family saga, and I love a big juicy book that you can kind of dig your teeth into, and that's what I think this is gonna be. I don't know exactly when I'll get to this one, but typically I do like to get into these big books during the summer and the winter, so hopefully it won't be too long and I can work through it while reading some other things. But this is one that I definitely have higher expectations for because it just seems like it's right up my street. I also got a fantasy. This is the beginning of a series that I have wanted to read for so long. I got The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. That's it. Chakraborty. I've heard other people say it. This is a fantasy series based in 18th century Cairo, which is like, that is what sold me. If you know me at all, you know I'm obsessed with Egypt. and it's somewhere that I desperately want to travel to when we can travel again. In this book we follow the protagonist named Nari, and it claims on the back that she has no magical powers, she's just very good at sleights of hand and tricks of the trade in the Cairo markets. And she wishes to leave Cairo one day, but she has to be careful what she wishes for. As it claims to have no magic, I'm a little confused on how it's going to be fantasy, but I'm intrigued. And that's what's important. So I'm definitely looking forward to picking this one up and getting into it. I think there are 2 other books in the series. There might be 3. I'm not sure if it's a trilogy or a saga, but either way, I'm hoping to really like this one. Like I said, I've been wanting to read it for a really long time, so it would be fair to say that my expectations are fairly high. But it's just another one where the reviews have been great and the intrigue and the interest for me is definitely there. So I think I'll be picking this one up soon, but to be honest, I've got so many fantasy series on the go right now, I might have to be careful when I choose to actually start this one. And to take a total left turn from that, I picked up a book I haven't heard many people talk about lately. Which surprises me because the cover is beautiful and the subject matter seems so important. And that is The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. This is another one that I saw on Instagram, and the first thing right off the bat is the cover that hit me. I'm not usually one for lots of color on my books, but I could not stop looking at this. I don't know why. Something about it really struck me. It's fair to say though that the synopsis of the book is just as striking as the cover. This takes place in Appalachia in 1986 during the AIDS epidemic, just as it was becoming a household known thing. We follow a character named Brian who moves to New York City as AIDS is claiming his friends, his lover, and then I believe he goes back to Appalachia and deals with that. And it's the story of that personal connection to the AIDS epidemic, and having to deal with all the people you love around you being claimed by it. Slowly but surely I've been trying to educate myself on the AIDS epidemic and the impact that had, particularly on the people who are experiencing it. I think the first book that really introduced me to this in a non-fiction, very touching and scary way is Derek Jarman's Modern Nature, which is a collection of diary entries of his that spreads over the few years that the AIDS epidemic was really becoming a problem, and then he contracted AIDS and he also bought Prospect Cottage and created a garden there. And I won't get too much into that because that's a whole separate video, and I really encourage you to read that book because it is life-changing. But once I read that, I knew I had to learn more about it. This is a fictionalized take, obviously, on that, but as with non-fiction, you can learn so much from fiction, and it is something I'm just trying to get a hold of myself and learn more about. So I think this I will probably be picking up once I'm done How Much of These Hills Are Gold, because it's just something that I keep thinking about without even having read it, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. So very, very soon you'll be hearing me talk about this one. A newer release that I picked up is The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. This is a story of 2 men that are working in a Deep South plantation. That is kind of all I want to know about it. Obviously this is going to be quite a hard-hitting book. I don't think that it'll be enjoyable necessarily, but much like The Prettiest Star, this is an education. This is a form of an education for me on the experience of working on a Deep South plantation and slavery and the very real prejudices working against this community. One of the really intriguing things about this novel as well is that this is a debut novel and it's already getting so much hype, so many good reviews, and I think it's probably getting a little bit of award buzz as well, so I'm so looking forward to this. I can't tell you how much. I'm a little nervous because I think it's going to be hard to read, but I am very, very much looking forward to picking this up and seeing what I can take from it, what I can learn from it. And then my last fiction book is another doorstopper. This is Joyce Carol Oates' Night, Sleep, Death, the Stars. And can we just look at the cover? So many covers in this haul are absolutely gorgeous. I picked this one up because I was watching someone review it online. I think they read it last year and said it was one of their favorite books. I'm not sure. But they had read it and they said that it was an incredible story of grief. And that is a topic that I find myself gravitating towards more and more since my father's passing. I think grief is so normal and so natural, and yet we don't want to talk about it, and we're uncomfortable with the subject. So I find a lot of peace and a lot of familiarity in books that tackle grief, and I guess it just makes me feel a lot less alone, to be honest. So I kind of bought this without knowing much more than it tackles grief. I believe what happens in this novel is that a man passes away and the book itself follows the reaction of his children and his widow, and how they deal with their grief and how they deal with his passing. I believe he dies in some kind of police injustice situation. It's not explicit on how he dies in the blurb, but it does say that there's some kind of police involvement and injustice, and that's obviously very, very pertinent at the moment. So yeah, it was just something that I gravitated towards, and the personal aspect on grief, especially since I think the novel is split up into each child and his widow, and grief is such an individual experience. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I've only ever read one Joyce Carol Oates before. I read Blonde, which I loved, and that's another doorstopper. Not all her books are this big, but that's another doorstopper, and it's a fictional take on Marilyn Monroe's life, and it was beautifully done. Very, very impressive. So I'm looking forward to picking up this one as well. I think she wrote a book called We Were the Mulvaneys, which is another kind of American family saga, which is how this is described. So if I like this one, I'm going to try that one out because I also believe it's quite widely lauded. I could be wrong, but that's what I believe. Okay, so that is all the fiction. Now we've got the non-fiction, and there's tons of non-fiction, and I have a feeling this video is going on a little bit longer than it should, so I'm going to try and work through these pretty quickly. A lot of them, like I said, you'll see a theme, so I won't have much to say about them because they're more kind of instructional, educational books, so that hopefully should make things a little faster. I bought tons of nonfiction because it's something I'm very much in the mood for, and like I said, some of these are more instructional and educational, and they're for a purpose, for like my individual purpose. I mean, all books are for a purpose, but they're for my individual purpose. So I'll try and work through those ones in particular fairly quickly. I'm going to start with 2 coffee table books that I bought that are not really for any reason other than they look really interesting and I wanted to read them. So I've got about 3 of those. The first one is one that my husband laughed at me for buying, and that is Murder Maps, but Crime Scenes Revisited. This is by Dr. Drew Gray, published by Thames and Hudson. It is a stunning book. It's beautiful. I really like true crime. If you've never been here before, hi, I really like true crime. It's something that I like to educate myself on and to learn from, and you know, I watch and listen to true crime stuff. This is a book of maps of cases throughout, I believe it's throughout the UK, although it could be in the States as well. And this book in particular goes between the years 1811 and 1911, and it says phrenology to fingerprint. So although I haven't read it yet, from what I can tell, it chronologically looks at particular crimes that were committed that led to the advancement of science in true crime. So we're looking at, you know, what were the cases where we started looking at phrenology? When did we start to look at fingerprints and why? And how did that technology come about? But it does that through the crimes that kind of catapulted that technology, if you know what I mean. I'm going to be really careful about what pages I show because there's a lot of graphic photos, there's a lot of crime scene photos, but particularly, like, there's maps of each crime that it looks at in the book, and they mark out different things. So this one in particular is in Italy, and it marks out crimes perpetrated by bandits. There's another map in, I believe, Budapest that looks at, like, last known addresses of killers, serial killers, I guess, or just crime doers. Like I said, this is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of very graphic crime scene photos, so if you don't like that, please don't look through this. There are things that, like, my husband's not really into true crime, and he's not particularly sensitive to crime scene photos, but I still wouldn't show him some of this because it's quite shocking. So as well as reading this, I think this takes a level of sensitivity that we all have to practice when considering true crime and the victims. And this does do, from what I've heard anyway, a good job at looking at the victims and their lives, and not just the crime committers, the killers themselves, because obviously that can be a problem in true crime. But I'm looking forward to reading through this because it's something I'm interested in. It's really so beautifully published and put together. And when I read it, I will probably either on here or write a blog post on how I feel it dealt with the very sensitive subject matter that you're reading about. In a bit of a different turn, I also picked up The Madman's Library by Edward Brooke Hitching, The Strangest Books, Manuscripts, and Other Literary Curiosities from History. This seems so freaking cool to me. I love this. This is just a collection of weird, bookish stuff throughout history. So it looks at books that were bound by human flesh. It also looks at religious oddities, curiosities of science, books of a spectacular size, strange titles, literary hoaxes, cryptic books. There's so many different categories in here. And yeah, it's just weird bookish stuff. And that is me. That is a book I want to read. So I saw this a little while ago in a bookshop and didn't pick it up just because, you know, it's a coffee table book, it's a little bit more expensive. But I had some birthday money, so I finally got to get it, and it was on sale. So I'm really excited to read about this one and to write about it and hopefully take some photos of the inside because the illustrations are amazing. I mean, a lot of these books are very, very old and were hand illustrated. And it's just, oh, it's incredible. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And then another awesome coffee table book that I picked up. And this kind of feeds in to some of the stuff I actually want to do on this channel and on my Patreon. But that is this huge, but it's Great Diaries, the world's most remarkable diaries, journals, notebooks, and letters. This is published by DK and has a foreword by Kate Williams. Don't know who edited this though, doesn't say. Okay, so there's a few editors, but it looks like the senior editor was Angela Wilkes from DK London. So that's cool. And there's a bunch of, there's also a few contributors as well. So R.G. Grant, Andrew Humphreys, Esther Ripley, and Ian Zazek, I think is how you pronounce that. And these are just freaking cool diaries throughout history. I've already had a look through here. They've got the diary of Charlotte Bronte, they've got the diary of Walter Scott, Leonardo da Vinci, Darwin's in here, Madame Curie's in here, which I think is particularly cool because the diaries that we do have of hers are still radioactive, which is awesome. I don't know, I think that's a cool fact. I don't know if it talks about that in here, but I read that in an article recently. Oscar Wilde's diary is in here, and it covers different time periods and the people within those time periods. Beatrix Potter, which you may see coming up in this video. John Muir, who else? Henry Bates, Leo Tolstoy, Henry David Thoreau, John Ruskin, Sir Walter Scott I already mentioned. Let's go a little bit deeper. Madame de Sévigné, Edward Barlow, William Bradford. I mean, like, so many different people. And I think I've probably talked about this before, but I will be doing some videos on journaling and art journaling because it's something I'm really enjoying later on. So I thought this could be, as well as just a really cool book to read, a little bit of a jump off for some inspiration. Okay, and then in no particular order, because they're all piled up here, I've got a whole bunch of other nonfiction that I'm going to try and get through somewhat quickly. The first book is actually a book that just came this morning. This is Serenity. Peaceful Projects to Soothe and Inspire. This is just a knitting book. It's got a bunch of projects in it. I'm trying to get better at knitting. I think because of the amount of projects I have going on right now, it's a little bit of a slow process, I'll be honest. But I thought this would be fun because I think I read on a blog post somewhere that it's got some good kind of beginner projects that I can look at using. My big goal in life for knitting is to be able to knit my own socks because it just sounds the coziest thing in the world. So I have to make some other kind of more simple projects first, just to gain a little bit of confidence. And I thought this might help with that. I also have a book on color theory. It's not much to say about this. I am going to be trying out some new painting materials and methods soon, and all the information I have is from high school, and it's mostly gone because that was a while ago now. So I just got a book on color theory just to better understand it. Also, before I get into painting like big things, I want to learn how to mix the paints that I've bought and make color charts as well, because as well as being really helpful, I think they're really beautiful. So I got a book on color theory. Another true crime book I picked up is Erik Larson's The Devil in the White City. This is the true story of the Chicago World Fair in 1893. There was a serial killer during the Chicago World Fair, and this is that story. Daniel H. Burnham, who was the architect for the Chicago World Fair, basically built this white city. Every building was white, and it's interesting. Obviously, he didn't know there was going to be a serial killer. But H.H. Holmes, who was the killer during this time, there's a stark contrast between color. It's interesting since we were just talking about color theory, but obviously he's killing, so it's this idea of like the red on white, the stains on the white city during what is supposed to be kind of a utopian time in this utopian place in Chicago. This is a classic true crime book, I would say. Like, I know it wasn't published that long ago, but pretty much everybody who likes true crime has read this, a little bit like Helter Skelter, which I read last year, but I've not picked it up yet. So I bought this one so that I could read through that. It's not going to be a happy book, it's not going to be a book I necessarily enjoy, but it is going to be something I can learn from, which is apparently just the theme of this book haul. I also picked up a biography of someone that I think is interesting, and that is Frank Lloyd Wright, who was a very, very famous architect, mainly working out of California many, many moons ago. This is Plagued by Fire, The Dreams and Furies of Frank Lloyd Wright by Paul Hendrickson. I've never read Paul Hendrickson before, although I know that he's written a book on Hemingway, I believe. It says author of Hemingway's Boat, which I guess is his other book that did quite well. This is less about Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture and design, and more about his life. He had a very kind of tumultuous, somewhat volatile life, and he was an angry man from what I understand. So this is just about his personal life, which I think will be really, really interesting. As an artist, I think it's almost impossible to separate your personal feelings and your personal life from your art in certain ways. So I'm interested to see more of that, and maybe jump off from this looking at more of his architecture, because he's just done some incredible, beautiful work. But this is just a little bit of a deeper insight into who he was as a man. And then speaking, actually, of Derek Jarman, I enjoyed Modern Nature so much that I picked up his next collection of diaries, his next diary collection. It's hard to put it into words. I know there's a word for it and I'm just totally losing it. But this is Smiling in Slow Motion by Derek Jarman, and this follows on from Modern Nature. It says Smiling in Slow Motion is Derek Jarman's last journal, stretching from May 1991 until a fortnight before his death from an AIDS-related illness in 1994. He writes about his friends, his humour, the garden at Prospect Cottage, and what it's like to live at Prospect Cottage. He also writes from his studio in London as well, and I think this one focuses a lot more on his own illness and his own suffering from AIDS as well. This is, I'm sure, going to be an emotional read, but I cannot tell you how beautiful Modern Nature was. And I think part of the reasons that I'm currently reading an Olivia Laing book, and she adores Derek Jarman, she's where I got the recommendation for Modern Nature from, not personally, obviously, that would be amazing, but I saw it on her Instagram. She talks a lot about him. And he was so creative, and he was unlike anybody I've learned about in the past. And in addition to just wanting to learn about him and his experiences and his art, he gives a really somewhat painful insight into suffering from AIDS and the real life experience of watching people you love suffer and pass away from AIDS. So I picked up his next book because I just want to read everything he's written now. He's one of those authors where I'm just like, I need more, I need to have more. And I know there are more diary collections out there, but obviously I started with Modern Nature, so I thought I'd just go on to his next one, which apparently is also his last one. This follows on until his passing. And speaking of kind of a non-fiction sequel, I've got another one. Last year I read In Montmartre, which I always mispronounce. I know there's like an accent at the end and I never get it right, so I'm not going to try. But that was by Sue Rowe. She has another book following on from that called In Montparnasse, The Emergence of Surrealism in Paris from Duchamp to Dali. In Montmartre, I think is how you, I'm literally not, In Montmartre, In Montmartre, which I am butchering because I can't pronounce it. In Montmartre, in her first book, which I think I'm getting closer to pronouncing correctly, she looks at the years 1900 to 1910 and the art scene there, particularly following, well, who was it? Matisse and Picasso, sorry, it's right over there. So this follows on from that. This is from 1910 to about 1920. Oh no, this is the 1920s. So this is 1920 to 1930. And it follows Duchamp to Dali and Surrealism. Sue Rowe is really, really good at bringing the atmosphere of this community of artists in Paris to life. I will say I'm lucky enough to have visited Paris, so there were a lot of things and a lot of places that she was talking about that I recognized, and that brought a certain amount of magic for sure. I've never actually been to Montparnasse, so this will be totally new to me, but along with this incredible atmosphere and bringing these people to life, her art history writing is just incredible. And it got me really excited about art history, which, as you can already see, has influenced the books that I've been buying and the books that I've been reading. So I was particularly interested to pick this up. I know she's got another book on the Impressionists, and that's not part of this kind of loose series. It's just on the Impressionists, I believe, but I just love her writing so much. I can't wait to read this one, and then I'm sure I'll pick up more of her books, and I hope there's more after this, because it's just so good. These books are just so good, so informative, but also give a really good look into the personal lives of the artists, which you can't ask for more, really. I picked up a new book, actually, by an author that I have a book of his and still haven't read, so naturally I picked up another one. And that is A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. I saw this on the unread shelf, I think. Maybe it was Fiction Mat. You know what? I don't even know. I saw it on Instagram. And whoever recommended it to me did a good job, because I went and picked it up. And this is George Saunders' non-fiction book about writing and reading and being a better reader and a better writer. The reviews I did read on Instagram about this book talk so beautifully about how this made the people who read it better readers, and made them want to go out and try writing and read more and read differently. So I couldn't really pass that up once I heard about it. George Saunders was also the Man Booker Prize winner with his book Lincoln in the Bardo, which, like I said, I just haven't read it yet, but I will do. And I'm hoping I really like his writing. Most of what I've heard is great, and so yeah, I am looking forward to this one and Lincoln in the Bardo. I also picked up 2 Fitzcarraldo editions, non-fiction ones. The first one is A Girl's Story by Annie Erno. Annie Erno is a French writer who writes mainly about her own life, but in this really beautiful kind of fragmented, poetic way. This is the 3rd book of hers that I have, and it's, I think, the newest one of hers that's been published. But I've only read one of hers, but I fell in love with it. So I read Happening or Happenings. I can't remember if it's got an S on the end. I also have The Years, and now I have A Girl's Story. And they're all about different parts of her life or different aspects of her life, different phases. And it's just... she's very quickly becoming an auto-buy author for me. So when I saw that this had been published, it went straight on my wish list, and now I'm very happy to have my own copy. And then the other Fitzcarraldo edition I got is one that I have been humming and hawing over for, months. And that is This Little Art by Kate Briggs. This is a book on translation, the art of translation, and Kate Briggs' own experience being a translator. Speaking of which, this is originally written in English, so there's no translator for this one, but this is originally written in French and was translated by Alison L. Strayer. I know very little about translation. I think I do an okay job at reading books in translation, but not nearly as good as I could be doing. I definitely need to reach out more, but I don't know much about the experience of translation. And it's interesting because my mom really wanted to be a translator. She didn't end up doing it, but she went to school to study English and also different languages. So she learned a lot of Russian, she already knew French, she did a little bit of German as well, and I think some other languages. And even though she never ended up doing it, language and translation was something my mom just has always loved. So I thought this would be really interesting to read, given that it's a passion of my mom's. And yeah, it might make me understand it a little bit better, because like I said, I don't really right now. And then another true crime, the last true crime book I bought is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I think a lot of you have probably heard of this book. This says that it's a seductive portrait of Savannah society, framed by the notorious trial of antiques dealer Jim Williams for murder, and looks at a crazy quilt of oddballs, poseurs, snobs, sorceresses, and outlaws. Yeah, right up my street. This is another kind of true crime classic of the genre. If you like true crime, you've probably read it or at least heard of it, and one that had kind of been neglected by me for a really long time. So I took the opportunity and picked up a copy. And then the last few books all kind of fall into that art instructional niche or theme. The first one I got is Show Your Work by Austin Cleon. Austin Cleon's first book, which I believe was Steal Like an Artist, yeah, was an absolute bestseller. I've not actually owned any of his other books, but this was one I was particularly interested in because it talks about how you show your creativity and get it out there, and you know, it says get discovered, but basically like be able to make a living, make your kind of world out of your art, which is something I'm trying to do. So, you know, I'll take all the advice I can get. I also got Daily Painting, Paint Small and Often to Become a More Creative, Productive and Successful Artist by Carol Marine. I got this recommendation off of a blog post as well. Same blog post by Miss Mustard Seed, who is an untrained artist, but she does these amazing oil paintings and she's so inspirational. I just think she's one of the coolest women on the internet right now. And I follow her on Instagram and I read her blog all the time. And I saw that she recommended this book when she had started oil painting. And it's a practice I'd really like to get into, that kind of daily painting or at least daily creating practice where I'm always using the creative part of my brain and my creative efforts. So since I'm trying to get better at painting, which, you know, you've probably put together by now, and I'm trying to get more into painting, I thought this would be really helpful. It also gives tips on how to paint, so how to mix colors, how to find perspective. What else is in here? It looks at different forms of art, so abstracts, realism, sketching, portraits, animals, landscapes. It kind of gives you a bit of everything so that you never run out of inspiration and you can kind of flip open the book and go, okay, what am I going to make today? What am I going to do today? And I think that's a really great thing to have. So I picked that one up. And I also got The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This is kind of about nurturing your creative soul, which I just think is awesome and something I need to be better at. I mean, just taking care of myself is something I need to be better at. But The Artist's Way is quite an old book now. I mean, it was first published in 1994. No, 1992. It was first published in Great Britain in 94, but in 92 in the US. And this is an updated version of that, and some of the topics it covers is recovering a sense of safety, recovering a sense of identity, a sense of power, integrity, possibility, abundance, connection, strength, compassion, self-protection, autonomy, and a sense of faith. And yeah, it's a mix between an art book and a self-help book, and I think it could give some really good practical tips. I know the Purple Palace, who is Sheena Clay, she's an artist who makes videos on YouTube as well. She read this and took some really great tips from it and really enjoyed it. So I kind of thought, you know what, I'm trying to get better at practicing creativity and kind of nurturing that, looking after that part of myself because it's such a big part of me. So I picked this up. And I did say that we would be revisiting Beatrix Potter later in this haul, and we are. I got, it's kind of a coffee table book, The Art of Beatrix Potter. She is such an inspiration to me. She was an avid gardener. She obviously loved nature. I don't particularly want to necessarily do children's illustration, although you never know what's gonna come at you. But Beatrix Potter did a lot of really incredible sketches and painting in different mediums of nature and landscape, and that's something I'm particularly interested in. So I thought, not only do I get a really beautiful book from a really beautiful artist that I'm sure while reading is just going to be like a wonderful experience, but I also get some inspiration, and I think that's great because artist block is a real thing. And sometimes it's nice to just flip through a book and go, oh, I like that. I'm going to see if I can do something like that as well, or, you know, do kind of a master study of her, which would be really, really interesting. So I picked up her art book. And the last book, we're finally here. This is the longest book haul ever. Is an instructional book. I don't have much to say. It's Vibrant Oils, and this kind of tells you what I'm looking to get into. I haven't done oil painting since high school, and I really loved it, but I kind of put it down after high school because I worked and I traveled and I went to uni, and now I'm 26. So I'm trying to get back into oil painting, basically. And I just thought this would be a really good base book to have to read about oil painting and how to mix, how to work with it, how to clean it up, and the different things that are involved. So that is the other book. Oh, and this one is by Haiti Jo Summers. So if you're looking to get into oil painting, I would also say this is another Miss Mustard Seed recommendation for when she was starting oil painting. So I took her word for it because I like her work. So apparently I was kidding. I actually have about 5 or 6 more books to tell you about that I totally forgot. They are the ones that I ordered. I either pre-ordered or for parcel reasons just haven't arrived yet. So I'll put the covers here. The first one is Outlawed by Anna North. I'm sure you guys have heard of this one. It was recently picked by Reese Witherspoon for her book club. I don't know, I've never really participated, but it sounds very good. It's another American West story because I am nothing if not predictable. It says, in the year of our Lord, 1894, I became an outlaw. It follows the character Ada, who feels lucky that she has just been married to someone that she actually loves, and she's started a job as an apprentice midwife, but as time goes on in her marriage, she just doesn't have children. And at this time, in this place, people start suspecting that she's a witch because she's barren. And as a result of this, she becomes an outlaw and just kicks ass. And it sounds like nothing I've read before. It mixes a whole lot of things that I love. And so I picked that one up, and that, I think I already mentioned this, but yeah, that one's coming out on the 28th of January 2021, apparently. Although I've seen some people with this book, so I don't know. But I don't have it yet. It's coming at the end of the month. Very much looking forward to it. The next book is coming out on February 2nd, and it's The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah. Kristin Hannah wrote The Nightingale, which I know can kind of polarize people, but I really loved it. This is a story about the American West. Oh, goodness. Yeah, so this one takes place in Texas in 1934, yes, and follows Elsa Martinelli, who kind of has her picture-perfect life. She has a family, she has a farm on the plains, and she's happy. But one day, her husband takes off, and there's a drought, and so the farm is basically destroyed because there's no water, and she has to choose what to do next. And so she chooses to take her children out to California, where, you know, they're supposedly going to be able to prosper better. And that is the story of that. I mean, I don't know. I'm just really predictable at this point. So, yeah. The last book... Oh, I should say The Four Winds is coming out on February 2nd, 2021. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but it should be coming out at the beginning of the month. And then the last book I pre-ordered is probably the most exciting, for me anyway, and it's Let Me Tell You What I Mean by Joan Didion, the Queen Joan. She is everything to me. This is being released in the UK on the 4th of February, but I believe it's already out in the US. And this is a collection of kind of never before collected essays and just writings that she's done before. A lot of these pieces are drawn from the earlier part of her, I think, 50-year career. So they are things that she wrote a lot with kind of Vogue in mind, because she wrote for Vogue for a very long time. And I think there are going to be a lot of things that I've never read before. So I'm really obviously stoked for this one. She is everything to me. She is my inspiration. And then the last 3 books are books that, for whatever reason, are just taking their time in the mail. The first one is the Cross-Stitch Dictionary by Sarah Hazel. Pretty self-explanatory. I am getting back into cross-stitching, and I need a book on the different kinds of stitches because I'm still at the beginning stage of stuff. So I picked that one up secondhand, so I think that's why that one's taking a little bit longer. I also picked up Dog Flowers, which is a memoir by Danielle Geller. This memoir is about Danielle Geller returning to the Navajo reservation and kind of retracing her mother's life. I believe her mother dies either just before it starts or at the beginning of the book, of trying to stop drinking alcohol, actually. So she goes through quite a violent withdrawal and ends up passing away. And this is the story of Geller kind of looking at her life as a Native American. Native American stories, or I'm from Canada, so we call them Indigenous stories, are something that I'm trying to read more of. Because I'm Canadian, I'm keenly, highly, sensitively aware of the horrible things that have happened to the Indigenous people and Native American people. And I think it's really important, as it's a part of my home country's history and quite a bad part of it, for me to educate myself more on that. And so I'm going to be starting with Dog Flowers, and if you have any more recommendations for books that you think I should read, then please leave them in the comments, because it's something I would like to be more aware of. And then lastly is another memoir. I picked up The Liars Club by Mary Karr. This is the first in quite a few memoirs by Mary Karr. From what I understand, this memoir looks specifically at Mary Karr's kind of child years growing up in Texas with an artist mother who had been married multiple times and suffered with psychosis at points and drinking, and she also had an abusive father. So it's looking back on that. I'm a bit of a geek for memoirs, and Mary Karr is always someone I have meant to get to, but I've been putting off. So I finally picked that up, and yeah, I don't know what's happening. I think maybe it's just being reprinted at the moment. So hopefully I will be getting that one soon as well. And that is it. My back hurts. We've been here for a while. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I will be hopefully reading and reviewing these books for you sometime soon, at least some of them. I probably won't do the instructional books, but I will talk about the instructional books, particularly on my Patreon and on here when I do some art videos, art vlogs, which will hopefully be coming up not too far in the future. If you would like to support me and the work I do, please consider checking out my Patreon account. I have 4 tiers at the moment. And I'm really excited about being more present on Patreon and making stuff for you guys to be able to enjoy, so consider checking that out. You can also follow me on social media, which is always linked down below, my different places and links to hang out in. I hope you guys are having a nice week, and I hope that you're doing well and keeping well, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!